At my husband's architecture firm's award ceremony, someone had replaced my name tag with one that read, Talentless Trophy Wife. His colleagues laughed as I stood there humiliated. David said nothing. As I walked toward the exit, I stopped by his senior partner and whispered, "You might want to review your structural calculations for the Riverside project. Wouldn't want anyone getting hurt." "So, Jennifer, what keeps you busy these days?" the real estate developer asked across the table at David's networking dinner. Before I could open my mouth, David interjected with that patronizing chuckle I'd grown to despise. "Oh, Jen dabbles in some interior design consultations from home. Nothing too demanding, just something to occupy her time while I handle the serious architectural projects." The words landed like a wrecking ball in our carefully decorated dining room. 3 months ago, my dabbling had identified critical structural flaws in a historic building renovation that would have resulted in catastrophic failure. My detailed engineering analysis had been published in the Journal of Structural Engineering and cited by preservation societies across the country. But according to my husband of 8 years, I was just keeping myself occupied. I maintained my composure, smiling politely at our guests while something fundamental cracked inside me. The developer's wife, a corporate lawyer whose firm I'd actually consulted for on building code violations, nodded with that infuriating sympathy reserved for women with hobbies. "How lovely that you have creative outlets," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "David must appreciate having a wife who understands his world, even if just superficially." I wanted to tell her that my structural engineering degree from MIT and my 10 years of forensic architecture work meant I understood David's world better than he did. Instead, I reached for my wine glass and wondered when exactly my husband had started viewing me as an amateur enthusiast, rather than the professional who'd once been his equal. The transformation hadn't been sudden. 10 years earlier, we'd met during a summer internship at Harrison and Associates, one of Boston's most prestigious architecture firms. 2 ambitious graduates with mountain-sized student debt and dreams of changing urban landscapes forever. I was working late on structural calculations for a mixed-use development when David's frustrated muttering at the adjacent desk became impossible to ignore. "You know you've been staring at that same elevation drawing for 40 minutes, right?" I said, not looking up from my load-bearing wall analysis. He turned with this sheepish expression that made something flutter in my chest. "That obvious? I can't figure out how to incorporate the historical facade requirements without compromising the modern design aesthetic. Have you considered a steel frame system behind the preserved exterior? Maintain the visual integrity while creating structural independence." David rolled his chair over to my workspace. "That's brilliant. You're Jennifer, right?" "The structural engineer everyone says is going to revolutionize seismic retrofitting." "And you're David Mitchell, the designer who thinks every building should look like a sculpture. We might have philosophical differences." "Or complementary perspectives," he countered, moving closer to examine my calculations. "Beautiful structures need solid bones. Art needs engineering." That conversation extended until security asked us to leave at midnight. We discovered we both survived on terrible coffee. Both believed architecture should serve communities rather than egos, and both feared mediocrity more than failure. David wanted to design buildings that inspired wonder, while I was obsessed with ensuring structures could withstand forces most people never considered. "Let's make a promise," I said as we walked through Boston's empty streets that summer night. "Whatever happens after this internship, we support each other's ambitions completely. No competition, just partnership." "Partners in building the future," he agreed, shaking my hand with exaggerated formality, literally and figuratively. We honored that promise completely during those early career years. When David interviewed for a position at Meridian Design Group, we spent weeks preparing. I analyzed their portfolio, identified gaps in their structural expertise, and helped him craft presentations, demonstrating how his design philosophy could address those weaknesses. "You're going to transform their entire approach to sustainable architecture," I told him while he adjusted his tie in our cramped apartment bathroom. "They'd be insane not to hire you." "And when you land that forensic engineering position at Sterling Consultants, "We're celebrating with champagne that doesn't come in boxes," he promised. My consulting practice started at our kitchen table because office space was financially impossible. I specialized in structural failure analysis, helping lawyers, insurance companies, and building owners understand why structures collapsed, cracked, or failed. The work required meticulous investigation, understanding material science, studying building codes across decades, and reconstructing events from evidence most people couldn't interpret. David never complained when our apartment transformed into a workspace covered in blueprints, engineering reports, and photographs of structural damage. He'd bring me coffee at 2 a.m. and look over my shoulder at calculations that meant nothing to him. "Solve any mysteries today?" he'd ask, massaging my shoulders while I highlighted stress concentration points in failed connections. "Actually, yes," I said one particularly productive evening. This warehouse collapse everyone blamed on poor maintenance? The original design had inadequate lateral bracing. The building was doomed from the day it was constructed. The owner's insurance company is about to save $3 million in wrongful death settlements. That sounds like you just prevented a massive injustice. Not prevented, just revealed the truth. The original architect cut corners and people died because of it. My report on that warehouse collapse established my reputation in forensic engineering. Suddenly, law firms across the Northeast wanted the structural engineer who could explain complex failures in terms juries understood. My phone rang constantly with attorneys needing expert testimony and building owners wanting comprehensive safety evaluations. David genuinely celebrated my success during those years. At parties, he'd introduce me as the engineer who can read buildings like crime scenes, and his pride was completely authentic. We were both building careers we believed in, both contributing equally to our shared future. His own career advanced steadily through various firms. He started as a junior designer, evolved into project architect, then secured positions with increasing creative control and impressive salary growth. I watched him develop confidence in client presentations and master the political complexities that would eventually catch Archer and Stone's attention. "I got the senior design architect position," he announced one evening, practically vibrating with excitement. "It's a significant promotion, but there's a complication. The firm's headquarters is in Portland, Oregon. That means relocating across the country." "When do we leave?" I didn't hesitate. "Jen, this means rebuilding your entire practice. All your client relationships, your professional network, everything you've established in Boston. And you're getting the opportunity to lead major urban design projects. This is exactly what we've worked toward. Of course we're moving." Relocating meant sacrificing everything I'd built professionally. I referred clients to competitors, dissolved business partnerships, and spent months researching Portland's construction industry and legal community. The financial cost was substantial, but watching David thrive in his new role felt worth every opportunity I surrendered. What I couldn't anticipate was how professional success would gradually corrode our partnership's foundation. The man who once sought my input on every decision started making choices independently. He'd come home discussing design competitions and complex projects, but when I'd offer structural perspectives, he'd smile dismissively and change subjects. "The complexity is different at this level" became his standard response when I questioned design choices that seemed structurally problematic. "This isn't comparable to your forensic investigation work." The shift accelerated dramatically when Victoria Cross became his direct supervisor around our 6th anniversary. Suddenly, every conversation revolved around Victoria's innovative design philosophy, her extensive international experience, her visionary approach to sustainable architecture. "She's absolutely revolutionary," David would say, describing some presentation Victoria had delivered. "She approaches spatial relationships in ways that completely reimagine urban density." I tried being supportive, suggesting we invite her for dinner. "She sounds like an incredible mentor. I'd enjoy meeting someone who's contributed so much to your development." "Victoria maintains an extremely demanding schedule," he said quickly. "Major client presentations, international site visits, design symposiums. She probably wouldn't have time for casual social occasions." Despite never meeting her, Victoria's influence on our marriage intensified significantly. David began dismissing my professional expertise entirely, characterizing my forensic work as narrow compared to his comprehensive design responsibilities. The engineer who'd prevented building failures was suddenly too specialized to understand real architectural innovation. The breaking point arrived when David received an offer to lead Archer & Stone's new sustainable design division. The opportunity was extraordinary, heading their expansion into green architecture with a compensation package that exceeded our combined previous income. "This is everything we've dreamed about," he said, showing me the offer documents. The chance to influence how cities approach environmental responsibility. What about my consulting practice? I've finally rebuilt my client base here. "You could reduce your caseload temporarily, just until I establish the new division. Then we'll have the financial security for you to be completely selective about projects." That evening at the networking dinner, listening to my husband reduce my career to dabbling, while strangers nodded sympathetically, I finally understood what our partnership had actually become. The developer was already redirecting his attention elsewhere, dismissing me as effectively as David had. I excused myself to the bathroom and stared at my reflection, remembering the ambitious engineer who'd once prevented catastrophic structural failures. She was still there, buried under years of compromises and diminished expectations. Walking back to the table, I made a decision that would change everything. I was done minimizing my expertise to make David comfortable. The foundation we'd built together was failing, but I still had the skills to construct something new. The opportunity came faster than expected. 5 days after that humiliating dinner party, David came home with unusual energy. "Victoria wants to meet you," he announced, loosening his tie while checking his phone. "There's a firm award ceremony next Thursday, and she specifically asked if you'd be attending." My coffee cup paused midway to my lips. After months of hearing about Victoria Cross's brilliant designs and innovative leadership, she suddenly wanted to meet the wife who dabbled in interior design. "She asked about me." "She said it was time she met the woman behind the man," David said with a smile that didn't quite mask something nervous in his expression. "Victoria believes in knowing her team members' families. She thinks it creates stronger workplace culture." The ceremony was held at the Portland Museum of Contemporary Art, and I spent far too long selecting my outfit. I settled on a charcoal dress that balanced professional and elegant, paired with simple jewelry that suggested confidence without ostentation. Looking in the mirror, I saw a woman prepared to make a positive impression on her husband's important supervisor. Victoria spotted us immediately upon entering the gallery space. She moved through the crowd like she owned it, which, given her position, she essentially did. Tall and angular, she wore a black designer suit that probably cost more than my monthly consulting income. Her handshake was firm, her smile calculated, and her eyes assessed every detail of my appearance in the 3 seconds it took to say hello. "Jennifer, finally," she said, her voice carrying sufficient volume to ensure nearby colleagues could hear. "David mentions you constantly. You must be so proud of his accomplishments here. We absolutely value him." "Thank you. He's passionate about the work." "And you work from home, correct? How quaint. It must be wonderful having such flexibility with your schedule." The word quaint landed with surgical precision, managing to diminish my entire career in a single utterance. "I run a forensic structural engineering practice specializing in failure analysis," I said, maintaining a pleasant tone. "How interesting. David mentioned you help with some building inspections. That's so helpful." Victoria's smile never wavered, but something predatory flickered behind her eyes. David is so fortunate to have someone who can be so accommodating with her career. Not every woman could be so adaptable. The conversation lasted perhaps 5 minutes, but I left feeling dissected by an expert. Victoria had managed to reduce my business to a hobby, my expertise to helpfulness, and my professional identity to convenience for David's career, all while appearing completely supportive and cordial. "She's impressive," I told David during our drive home, testing his reaction. "Isn't she? Victoria has this ability to understand what truly matters in architecture. She's been transformative for my career development." 3 weeks later, the first text message arrived. "Happy holidays, Jennifer. Hope you're staying busy with your projects while David handles all the exciting developments here at Archer and Stone. So grateful to have such a dedicated team member. Victoria." I stared at the message for a full minute. Superficially, it was perfectly pleasant. Underneath, it positioned my work as mere projects while emphasizing David's importance to her exciting developments. When I showed David, he barely glanced at it. That's thoughtful of her to reach out. Victoria's very considerate about maintaining relationships with families. The messages continued with mechanical regularity. Valentine's Day brought, "Hope you and David have a lovely celebration. He's been working so hard on our sustainability initiatives. You're so understanding about his dedication to excellence." Easter. "Thinking of you both during this special time. David mentioned how supportive you are of his career growth. So wonderful that he has someone to keep things stable at home." Each message felt like a paper cut. Small, precise, and designed to sting just enough to be noticed, but not enough to seem intentionally harmful. Victoria had perfected the art of the backhanded compliment, wrapping insults in concern and diminishment in praise. "Am I being oversensitive?" I asked David after the Easter message left me feeling particularly deflated. Victoria's just being collegial. She sends similar notes to all the senior architect spouses. "You're reading too much into it." But I wasn't reading too much into anything. My years of analyzing structural failures had taught me to recognize patterns, and Victoria's pattern was becoming crystal clear. She was systematically repositioning me in David's perception from partner to appendage. The transformation in David's behavior became impossible to ignore. He started coming home with Victoria's opinions on everything from design trends to lifestyle choices. When we discussed renovating our bathroom, he'd say, "Victoria thinks subway tiles are dated. She prefers large format porcelain." When I suggested we vacation in Barcelona to see Gaudi's architecture, he'd respond with, "Victoria says European study trips are less valuable than engaging with contemporary American urbanism." The most infuriating part was how he'd present Victoria's advice as if it came from supreme authority. Victoria's insights into work-life integration are really eye-opening, he'd say, completely missing the irony that her advice was pulling him further from our actual life together. One evening, I tried discussing a concerning trend I'd noticed in recent building failures. "The connection details in these new mass timber structures are starting to worry me," I said over dinner. "There are failure patterns that suggest inadequate understanding of long-term moisture effects on steel-to-wood connections." David barely looked up from his phone. "Victoria thinks mass timber represents the future of sustainable construction. She says people who focus too much on traditional engineering concerns miss the bigger environmental picture." Victoria is not a structural engineer, David. This is actually my area of expertise. Victoria has a master's from Harvard's Graduate School of Design and 20 years of award-winning practice. She understands structural systems. The dismissal was complete. My decade of forensic engineering, my track record of preventing building failures, my specialized expertise in structural analysis, all of it had become irrelevant compared to Victoria's general architectural knowledge. Victoria's genius extended beyond just influencing David's opinions. She orchestrated my exclusion from his professional world with surgical precision. Firm events would be scheduled when she knew I had client commitments. She'd send invitations to optional spouse gatherings, then later mention how disappointed she was that I couldn't attend. "The other senior architects' wives are so involved in our firm culture," she told David during one of their frequent phone calls, her voice clearly audible from the kitchen where I was preparing dinner. "Margaret Chen brings homemade treats to every event, and Sandra Yamamoto organized that wonderful sustainability workshop. It really makes a difference when families are engaged." The message was clear. I was failing as an architect's wife by prioritizing my own work over David's firm functions. Victoria would schedule design charrettes that explicitly excluded spouses, then ensure David came home with stories about how collaborative and inspiring they were. Meanwhile, when other firms hosted family-inclusive events, Victoria would find reasons why David needed to skip them. Victoria needs me to review the competition submission that evening, became his standard excuse. Slowly but methodically, I was being erased from David's professional life, relegated to the role of the accommodating wife who couldn't quite keep up with the ambitious architectural crowd. My breaking point came during a phone conversation I accidentally overheard. David was in his home office with the door slightly open, and Victoria's voice carried clearly through our house. "You have so much potential, David. I see you leading major urban design projects within 2 years. But you need to surround yourself with people who understand that level of ambition, people who can match your vision and drive." "Jennifer's very supportive of my career," David said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Of course she is, in her own way, but support and true partnership are different things. You need someone who can elevate your thinking, challenge your design assumptions, push you toward excellence, someone who operates at your level." I stood frozen in our hallway, listening to Victoria systematically dismantle my marriage while positioning herself as the solution to David's professional and personal needs. That night, I started keeping detailed documentation of every interaction, every comment, every subtle manipulation. As someone trained in forensic investigation, I finally understood exactly what Victoria was doing. She wasn't just undermining my relationship with David. She was conducting a hostile takeover of my marriage, using the same strategic thinking she'd apply to winning a major design competition. The most painful part was watching David fall for it completely, interpreting her calculated manipulation as mentorship and professional development. The man who'd once valued my analytical mind couldn't see the analysis that mattered most. Victoria Cross was systematically destroying us. The documentation of Victoria's manipulations was hidden in my office filing cabinet when David burst through our front door that Tuesday evening in April, practically bouncing with an energy I hadn't seen since graduate school. "Clear your schedule for next Saturday," he announced, tossing his portfolio case onto the couch with uncharacteristic carelessness. "We're attending the Archer and Stone annual awards ceremony." I looked up from my laptop where I'd been reviewing photographs of a failed curtain wall connection. "We're attending what?" "The firm award ceremony. Victoria specifically insisted you attend this year. She said, 'It's time Jennifer experienced the full Archer and Stone culture.'" David was practically glowing as he loosened his tie. "This is significant, Jen. The ceremony is where they announce major promotions, where the real professional connections happen. Victoria wouldn't have insisted you come unless something important was planned." That word, insisted, sent ice water through my veins. After months of strategic exclusion, Victoria suddenly wanted me at the firm's most important social event. My analytical mind immediately began calculating possibilities, none of them positive. "She insisted," I repeated carefully. She pulled me aside after the design review today and said, "David, it's time Jennifer joined us for the ceremony. I have a feeling this year will be especially significant for both of you." He was searching through our closet now, pushing hangers aside with unusual enthusiasm. "Where's that deep blue dress? The one you wore to the structural engineering conference 2 years ago?" I blinked in surprise. David hadn't commented on my clothing choices in months, yet he remembered a specific dress from 2 years earlier. "It's in the back behind the winter coats." "Perfect. You looked stunning in that dress. Victoria mentioned she's looking forward to seeing you in something elegant." The week leading up to the ceremony felt surreal. David was suddenly attentive in ways that felt almost nostalgic, like he was trying to recapture some version of us that had existed before Victoria's influence poisoned everything. He brought me coffee in the mornings without prompting, asked about my consulting cases with genuine interest, and even suggested we review structural details together like we used to. "I want everything to be perfect Saturday evening," he said, unnecessarily straightening his tie in our bedroom mirror. This could be the moment that transforms our entire future. Despite every instinct screaming warnings, I allowed myself to hope. Maybe Victoria had realized that excluding me was counterproductive. Maybe she'd decided that accepting me was easier than fighting me. Maybe this was her olive branch, her way of acknowledging that I was an important part of David's life, regardless of her preferences. I threw myself into preparation with an enthusiasm I hadn't felt in months. The expensive salon downtown gave me a professional treatment that cost more than I usually spent on groceries. A stylist arranged my hair in an elegant style that made me feel confident and sophisticated. I spent hours researching current architectural trends, memorizing details about Archer & Stone's recent projects and award submissions. Tell me about the Sustainable Housing Initiative. I practiced in front of our bathroom mirror. I read the preliminary environmental impact analysis was quite promising. For the first time in months, I felt like I was reclaiming my professional identity. The woman who used to command respect in engineering conferences was still there, just buried under months of being dismissed and diminished. I was ready to show David's colleagues that I was more than just a supportive spouse. I was an intelligent partner with valuable expertise and professional credibility. The Portland Museum of Contemporary Art lived up to every description David had provided. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the city skyline, and servers in black uniforms carried champagne glasses through crowds of elegantly dressed architects and their partners. Walking through the entrance in my blue dress and carefully styled hair, I felt confident and prepared. But the moment we entered the main gallery space, something shifted. David's hand on my back felt performative rather than supportive, like he was playing a role rather than naturally escorting his wife. His eyes immediately found Victoria across the room, and I watched his posture change from relaxed to alert. "There she is," he murmured, and I couldn't tell if he meant it as information or anticipation. Victoria approached us like a curator presenting an important installation, her silver dress catching the gallery lighting with every calculated step. Her smile was theater bright, visible from across the room. "Jennifer, you actually came," she said. The emphasis on actually was subtle but unmistakable, designed to sound surprised and delighted while implying that my attendance was somehow unexpected or uncertain. "Thank you for suggesting I join," I replied, keeping my voice pleasant and professional. "Well, David deserves to have his plus one here for such a special evening," Victoria said. The phrase plus one was delivered with surgical precision, reducing me from wife and partner to accessory in front of a room full of David's colleagues. I felt David's hand tighten slightly on my back, but he said nothing to correct Victoria's characterization. "Let me show you to your table," Victoria continued, her voice carrying enough volume to ensure nearby architects could hear every word. "I made sure you were seated with some lovely people who I'm sure will have fascinating things to discuss with you." She guided us through the gallery like a hostess showing guests to their designated spots. Other couples were finding their seats, checking name tags, settling in for what was clearly going to be an elaborate evening of professional celebration. "Here we are," Victoria announced, gesturing toward an elegantly set round table near the center of the space. "David, you're right here next to me at the leadership table, of course." My stomach dropped. "We're not sitting together?" "Oh, didn't David explain? Senior architects sit at the leadership table. Spouses have their own seating arrangements." Victoria's tone was apologetic but firm, as if this was standard protocol rather than another strategic separation. I looked at David, expecting him to object or at least appear surprised by this arrangement. Instead, he was already moving toward the leadership table, his attention focused on Victoria's explanation of the evening's agenda. "Your name tag should be right here somewhere," Victoria said, scanning the elegant table settings with theatrical concern. I began checking the small cream-colored name tags at each place setting, reading names of people I didn't recognize. Amanda Foster, project coordinator. Robert Kim, architectural intern. Margaret Chen, senior associate. And then I found mine. The tag was identical to all the others, cream cardstock with elegant calligraphy in deep black ink, but instead of my name, it read, "Talentless Trophy Wife." The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. I stared at the tag, reading it again to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. The professional presentation somehow made it worse. This wasn't a spontaneous insult scrawled in anger. This was a carefully planned humiliation, designed and executed with the same attention to detail as the rest of the evening's arrangements. The laughter started as a ripple and built to a wave. The other people at the table had seen the tag, and their reactions ranged from shocked gasps to poorly concealed amusement. I heard someone whisper, "Oh my God, did you see what her name tag says?" Still clinging to him after all these years, a woman's voice said behind me, followed by more laughter. The sound grew louder as more people noticed the commotion and came over to see what was causing such a stir. Within moments, half the gallery was either staring at me or actively laughing at the elegant calligraphy that had reduced me to a punchline. I turned to David, expecting anger, outrage, or at minimum some sign that he was as shocked by this cruelty as I was. Instead, I found him staring at his water glass like it contained profound architectural secrets. His face was carefully neutral, his shoulders tense with what I realized wasn't surprise, but discomfort at being caught in the middle of something he'd known was coming. "David," I said quietly, giving him one last chance to defend me, to show some sign that the man I'd married was still somewhere inside the stranger wearing his face. He couldn't meet my eyes. His silence stretched across the laughter and whispered comments, speaking louder than any words could have. In that moment, I understood with absolute clarity that this wasn't just Victoria's masterpiece of public destruction. David was a willing participant in my humiliation. The silence wasn't shock. It was complicity. The man I'd supported through every career challenge, the partner I'd sacrificed my professional network for, the husband I'd loved and trusted for 8 years, couldn't find the courage to defend me against the cruelest public humiliation I'd ever experienced. I looked around the gallery at the faces surrounding me, some laughing, some uncomfortable, all witnessing my complete destruction. The weeks of preparation, the hope I'd allowed myself to feel, the confidence I'd carefully rebuilt, all of it crumbled into dust. But as I stood there holding that name tag, something else crystallized inside me. The woman they were laughing at, the talentless trophy wife, had skills they couldn't imagine. And Victoria Cross had just made the biggest mistake of her carefully calculated career. I walked toward the exit with my head held high. And as I passed the senior partner who was chuckling at Victoria's brilliant joke, I leaned close to his ear. "You might want to review your structural calculations for the Riverside project," I whispered. "Wouldn't want anyone getting hurt." The taxi driver kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror during the silent ride home from the museum, probably wondering why a woman in an expensive dress was sitting in his back seat with tears streaming down her face. I didn't speak until we pulled into my driveway, and even then I could only manage a whispered "thank you" as I handed him cash. David's car wasn't in the driveway. He was probably still at the ceremony, probably celebrating with Victoria and the colleagues who'd found my humiliation so entertaining. The house felt different when I walked through the front door. Smaller somehow, like it belonged to someone else's life. I spent Sunday in bed staring at the ceiling and replaying every moment of Saturday night. The laughter, David's silence, the senior partner's smirk when I whispered my warning about the Riverside project. By Sunday evening, something had crystallized inside me. The woman they'd humiliated wasn't talentless or a trophy. She was dangerous, and they had no idea what they'd unleashed. Monday morning, I sat in my home office staring at my laptop like it was a portal capable of transporting me back to the person I used to be. The screen was black, reflecting my face back at me, but I could see beyond that reflection to the woman who'd once prevented catastrophic building failures. My fingers moved across the keyboard with muscle memory I didn't realize I'd retained. Password after password came back to me as I accessed databases I'd maintained but barely touched in months. Engineering journals, building code archives, structural failure databases, professional liability insurance records. The subscriptions I'd kept active just in case suddenly felt like the smartest money I'd ever spent. The first thing I opened was Archer & Stone's project portfolio on their public website. As I scrolled through photographs of elegant buildings and design award citations, something I hadn't felt in years began burning in my chest. Professional hunger. The thrill of investigation. The satisfaction of seeing patterns that others missed. "Let's see what you've been hiding," I whispered to my screen. Within an hour, I found the first irregularity, the Riverside mixed-use development, the project I'd mentioned to the senior partner, had structural calculations that didn't align with the building's actual loading conditions. Someone had used residential load factors for areas that would clearly function as commercial space. The mistake wasn't immediately obvious, but it was fundamentally dangerous. I pulled up the building permit applications through the city's online portal. Victoria's signature appeared on the structural certification documents. She'd personally approved calculations that were inadequate for the building's intended use. My coffee grew cold as I dug deeper into Archer & Stone's recent projects. A mass timber office building with connection details that ignored long-term moisture considerations. A renovation project that removed load-bearing elements without adequate engineering analysis. A seismic retrofit that didn't meet current code requirements despite claiming compliance. Sloppy, I muttered, highlighting another discrepancy. Overconfident and dangerously sloppy. By Tuesday afternoon, I had enough material to fill a detailed engineering report. But a standard report would take months to process through official channels, and I wanted faster results. I needed a different approach. The anonymous post to the Structural Engineering Forum took me 3 hours to craft. I chose the username Structural Watchdog and wrote an analysis that would be impossible for licensed engineers to ignore. Critical safety concerns at Portland architecture firm, a technical analysis of structural inadequacies. I included diagrams showing the loading discrepancies in the Riverside project, calculations demonstrating the inadequacy of the mass timber connections, photographs with annotations highlighting the removed load-bearing elements in the renovation project. Everything was documented with precise citations to building codes, engineering standards, and professional practice guidelines. The post went live Wednesday morning at 5 a.m., time to catch engineers before they started their workday. By noon, it had been shared across 4 major professional forums and cited in 2 industry blogs focused on construction safety. Wednesday evening brought the first surprise, an email to a secure account I'd created for the anonymous posts. Whoever you are, thank you. I've been concerned about Archer & Stone's work for months, but didn't have the technical expertise to document it properly. Your analysis is exactly what the profession needs. There's more where that came from if you're interested. A concerned professional. The attached documents made my pulse quicken. Internal emails discussing ways to expedite permit approvals by simplifying structural calculations. Meeting notes about reducing engineering costs by making reasonable assumptions about loading conditions. Most damaging of all, a thread where Victoria explicitly discussed prioritizing design aesthetics over structural conservatism. The lateral system is probably overdesigned anyway. We can reduce the moment frame members and save the client $200,000. The building will still be safe. Engineers are always too conservative. One email read, Victoria's response was even more damning. Agreed. We need to be competitive on pricing. Architecture is about vision, not paranoid engineering. Thursday brought another bombshell. Someone had forwarded me a screenshot from Archer & Stone's internal communication system posted Saturday night during the ceremony. Victoria, did you all see Jennifer's face when she found her name tag? Priceless. Sarah, I can't believe you actually did it. Savage! David said she needed to understand her place. Mission accomplished. She won't be bothering us with her expert engineering opinions anymore. The screenshot was timestamped 10:53 p.m. Saturday, less than an hour after I'd left the ceremony. Victoria had been bragging about humiliating me while I was crying in a taxi. I saved the screenshot and added it to my growing file. The pattern was becoming clear. Victoria wasn't just manipulative in her personal relationships. She was reckless and arrogant in her professional conduct too. Friday morning, I published a follow-up post incorporating the new evidence. This one was titled Professional Culture and Structural Safety, When Leadership Failures Create Public Risk. The response was immediate and explosive. Local news stations started calling Archer & Stone's office. The Oregon Board of Architectural Examiners opened a preliminary inquiry. Professional liability insurance companies began reviewing their coverage of the firm's projects. I watched it all unfold from my home office, sipping coffee and feeling more alive than I had in months. Every news alert, every professional inquiry, every engineer's comment, Questioning Archer & Stone's practices felt like validation of everything Victoria and David had dismissed about my capabilities. By Friday afternoon, 3 of Archer & Stone's major clients had requested independent structural reviews of their projects. The firm issued a statement about addressing recent concerns raised by the engineering community and announced they were conducting a comprehensive internal review of their structural documentation. I knew that internal review would find exactly what I'd already documented. Victoria's fingerprints were all over the inadequate calculations, and her arrogance had left a paper trail that would be impossible to explain away. The anonymous whistleblower emails were flooding in now. Current employees, former employees, contractors who'd witnessed questionable practices. Everyone wanted to share what they knew with the person who'd finally spoken up about Archer & Stone's problems. One message particularly caught my attention. I'm a junior architect at Archer & Stone. Victoria Cross has been pressuring our team to cut structural costs and expedite reviews for months. I've been documenting everything because I was scared of losing my license if I reported it. Your posts gave me the courage to contact the state licensing board directly. Thank you for giving us a voice. Victoria had built her entire professional identity on confident design and dismissing engineering concerns. And now that foundation was crumbling completely. The same arrogant thinking she'd used to undermine my marriage had made her reckless with public safety. Saturday evening, exactly 1 week after the ceremony, I poured myself a glass of wine and reviewed the week's accomplishments. Archer & Stone was under investigation by the state licensing board and the building department. Their professional liability insurance carrier had placed them under heightened scrutiny. Victoria's professional reputation was crumbling as journalists dug deeper into the culture she'd created. The woman they'd called a talentless trophy wife had triggered the biggest architecture safety scandal in Portland that year. And I was just getting started. David still hadn't come home. According to his LinkedIn status, he was managing crisis communications for Archer & Stone. I wondered if he had any idea that his dismissed wife was the anonymous engineer bringing down his beloved firm. As I closed my laptop that evening, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: professional satisfaction. Structural watchdog was back, and she was hungrier than ever. The truth had momentum now, rolling downhill like an avalanche. All I had to do was step back and watch Victoria Cross's carefully constructed world collapse under the weight of her own arrogance. Sunday morning brought the phone call I'd been anticipating. My secure line rang at 7:15 a.m., and the voice on the other end belonged to Marcus Chen, an investigative journalist from the Oregonian. "I'm trying to reach Structural Watchdog," he said. "I know this is unconventional, but your Archer & Stone analysis has caught significant attention. We'd like to expand on your findings for a front-page investigation." I'd been preparing for this moment since Friday's media response. "What kind of expansion?" "We've independently verified most of your documentation. Our investigation team has uncovered additional evidence supporting your conclusions about inadequate structural oversight. We want to run a comprehensive expose, but we need to ensure our source material is bulletproof." 25 minutes later, I'd anonymously provided Marcus with additional documentation that would make his article unassailable. The Oregonian's credibility would amplify my findings beyond anything I could accomplish through forum posts. Monday's headline read, "Portland architecture firm under fire for safety violations." The article detailed everything I'd discovered, plus information their investigative team had gathered independently. Victoria's name appeared 19 times, each mention more damaging than the last. By 9 a.m., 2 of Archer & Stone's largest projects had been suspended pending independent structural reviews. The firm's stock, they'd gone public 2 years earlier, dropped 23% before trading was halted. I watched the chaos unfold from my home office, sipping coffee that tasted like vindication. The first news alert about Victoria personally arrived at 10:52 a.m. Senior architect Victoria Cross placed on administrative leave pending investigation. I screenshot the notification and saved it in a folder labeled Accountability. David's key turned in the front door at 1 p.m., 4 hours earlier than usual. His footsteps on our hardwood floors sounded heavy, defeated. I heard him drop his portfolio case by the entrance. Something he never did. Jennifer. His voice carried a vulnerability I hadn't heard in years. In the office, I called back, not looking up from my laptop where I was tracking Archer and Stone's continued decline. He appeared in my doorway looking like he'd aged 10 years in 10 days. His usually immaculate appearance was disheveled, hair uncombed, tie loosened, expensive suit wrinkled. "We need to talk," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk without invitation. "About what?" "About Victoria. About the investigation. About everything that's happening at the firm." He rubbed his face with both hands. "I don't know how much you've heard, but it's catastrophic. Truly catastrophic." I minimized my browser window and gave him my full attention. "What kind of catastrophic?" "The state licensing board is launching a formal investigation. The FBI seized documents from Victoria's office this morning. Apparently, there are potential criminal negligence issues. There are rumors about charges if anyone gets hurt from the structural deficiencies." He looked at me with desperate eyes. "I've been working closely with Victoria for 2 years, Jennifer. If they find evidence of knowing negligence, anyone associated with her decisions could be implicated." "That sounds serious." "It is serious. My career could be over. Everything we've built together could disappear." He leaned forward, reaching for my hand across the desk. "That I need your engineering expertise. You're the most brilliant structural engineer I know. Could you help me understand what they might be looking for?" The irony was breathtaking. The man who dismissed my professional insights for months was now begging for the expertise he'd called narrow and specialized. "Why would you need my help? Doesn't Victoria have everything under control?" David's laugh was bitter. "Victoria's completely falling apart. She's blaming everyone except herself, claiming she was just following standard architectural practice. But some of the documentation, Jennifer, I think she might have been cutting corners deliberately." "That would be professional negligence." "I know what it would be." His voice cracked with stress. "I'm terrified, Jen. For the first time in my career, I'm genuinely frightened about my professional future." I studied his face, seeing real fear behind the desperation. Part of me felt sympathy for the man I'd once loved unconditionally, but a larger part felt cold satisfaction at watching his world crumble the same way mine had at that ceremony. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" "Help me distance myself from Victoria's decisions. Review the documents I was involved with and help me understand which ones might look problematic to investigators." He paused, swallowing hard. "I know I haven't been the best husband lately. I know I haven't appreciated your professional skills the way I should have. But we're a team, right? Partners for life." The words he'd spoken 10 years ago in that Boston parking lot felt hollow now, tainted by years of dismissal and culminating in his silence during my public humiliation. "When did you last consider us partners, David?" He blinked, clearly unprepared for the question. "What do you mean?" "When did you last ask for my opinion on something important? When did you last value my professional expertise? When did you last defend me when someone attacked my credibility?" His face went pale as understanding dawned. "Jennifer, if this is about the ceremony..." "It's about everything, David. The ceremony was just the final confirmation of what we'd become." I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a manila folder I'd been preparing for this conversation. Inside were copies of apartment listings, consultations with divorce attorneys, and financial projections showing exactly how much my consulting business could generate if I focused on it full-time. "What is this?" he asked, though his voice suggested he already knew. "My exit strategy. I've been rebuilding my professional network while watching your precious mentor destroy her career through arrogance and negligence." I handed him the top document, a consulting contract with a major insurance company worth more than his annual salary. 4 former clients want to hire me full-time. My reputation for technical precision and professional integrity never disappeared, David. I just buried it to support a husband who stopped seeing my value. His hands shook as he read the contract terms. "You're leaving me. I'm saving myself. There's a difference. But Victoria's investigation, my career, everything's falling apart." "Victoria's investigation exists because someone with my skills decided to examine her work closely. Her career is ending because she was reckless and arrogant. Your career is in jeopardy because you chose loyalty to a negligent mentor over respect for your wife. David stared at me for a long moment, and I saw the exact moment he began connecting dots he should have connected weeks ago. You know something about this investigation, don't you? I closed my laptop and stood up. I know that truth has a way of surfacing when someone with the right expertise decides to look for it. Jennifer, what did you do? I reminded everyone that the talentless trophy wife from the ceremony actually has an MIT degree in structural engineering and a decade of experience preventing building failures. I walked to our bedroom and began pulling clothes from my closet. I did what I should have done years ago. I stopped hiding my capabilities to make other people comfortable. David followed me, watching as I methodically folded clothes into suitcases with the same precision I'd once used to analyze structural failures. You can't just leave. We can work through this. When did you plan to start respecting my professional expertise? After Victoria's trial? After your career recovers from association with negligence? After you finally decide I'm worth defending? He sat on our bed, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. I know I messed up. I know I should have said something at the ceremony, but Victoria said it was just a joke, that you'd understand the humor. Victoria told you about the name tag in advance. It wasn't a question. David's silence confirmed what I'd suspected since that night. She showed you the tag before the event, didn't she? You knew I was walking into that humiliation, and you said nothing. She said it would be funny. She said you'd laugh about it later, that it would break the ice and make everyone more comfortable. I stopped packing and looked at him directly. Did you really believe that, or did you just not care enough to stop it? He couldn't meet my eyes, which was answer enough. I zipped my suitcase and headed for the door. On our kitchen counter, I left a note with words I'd been composing for weeks. David, it's not the insult that broke us. It's the silence that followed. The woman you dismissed is the same woman who just brought down your mentor's empire. Maybe next time you'll remember that underestimating people has consequences. Jennifer walking out of that house felt like stepping into sunlight after years in shadow. My phone buzzed with another news alert. Architect Victoria Cross under criminal investigation for professional negligence. Structural watchdog was fully awake now, and she was just getting started. The apartment I found was everything our house had never been. Bright, clean, and entirely mine. Floor-to-ceiling windows in the living room overlooked Portland's downtown skyline, and morning sunlight streamed across hardwood floors that bore no memory of arguments or silent dinners. The kitchen was small but efficient, perfect for someone who planned to spend most of her time building a career rather than hosting dinner parties for people who didn't respect her. Moving in took exactly one afternoon. 8 years of marriage and everything I truly wanted fit into my car in 7 boxes. I hung my diplomas on the wall of my new home office. The MIT degree in structural engineering, the professional engineering license, the awards from industry organizations that had recognized my work before I'd buried it to support David's ambitions. Welcome to your new life, Jennifer, I said to my reflection in the bathroom mirror that first night. The woman staring back at me looked different already. Shoulders straighter, eyes clearer, expression set in determined lines rather than the apologetic softness I'd worn for years. Tuesday morning brought the phone call that would reshape everything. Catherine Morrison from Pacific Structural Group had been trying to reach me for 4 days. Jennifer, I've been following your work for years, especially your recent analysis of architectural safety issues, she said without preamble. We need someone with your expertise as our new forensic engineering director. The compensation package starts at $240,000 plus performance bonuses. I nearly dropped my coffee mug. You want to hire me full-time? We want to build an entire forensic division around your analytical approach. Your reputation for preventing catastrophic failures is exactly what the construction industry needs right now. 4 weeks later, I walked into Pacific Structural Group's modern offices wearing a navy suit that fit perfectly and confidence I'd forgotten I possessed. My business cards read, Jennifer Chen, Director of Forensic Engineering, and seeing my name in elegant lettering felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I'd lost years ago. My first major assignment was investigating a suspected foundation failure in a downtown high-rise. Within days of examining the construction documents, I found patterns that reminded me of my early consulting days. Soil testing that seemed designed to support predetermined conclusions rather than reveal actual conditions. Foundation designs that ignored clear geotechnical warnings. "This building has serious settlement issues," I told Catherine during our weekly meeting. "The foundation system is inadequate for the actual soil conditions, and they ignored the geotechnical engineer's recommendations. Someone's going to get sued for millions." "How certain are you?" "Certain enough to stake my reputation on it." I slid my analysis across her desk. "Give me another week to document everything, and you'll have a report that protects your client and exposes the truth." Catherine smiled. "This is exactly why we hired you." Working again in a professional environment where my expertise was valued felt like breathing after years of suffocation. My colleagues treated me as an equal partner in complex engineering decisions. During technical meetings, people leaned forward when I spoke, rather than politely waiting for me to finish. My insights shaped construction safety decisions affecting tens of millions of dollars in projects. Jennifer's analysis just prevented a catastrophic failure investigation, Catherine announced during our quarterly partners meeting. Her forensic work uncovered foundation inadequacies that would have resulted in building damage and approximately $60 million in liability. The applause felt genuine, earned, real. For the first time in years, I was being recognized for the work I actually did, rather than dismissed as someone who dabbled in building inspections. The news alert about Victoria arrived on a Wednesday morning while I was reviewing structural calculations for a bridge project. Former architect Victoria Cross indicted on criminal negligence charges. The accompanying photograph showed a woman I barely recognized. Gone were the designer suits and commanding presence that had once intimidated me. Victoria stood outside the federal courthouse wearing flat shoes and an inexpensive blazer, her shoulders hunched in defeat. The woman who'd built her career on confident design looked small and ordinary. The charges were serious: criminal negligence, professional misconduct, and conspiracy to defraud clients by misrepresenting structural adequacy. Each count carried potential prison time and guaranteed professional destruction. I read the article twice, feeling something I hadn't expected. Not triumph, but quiet satisfaction. Justice had been served not through revenge, but through simple exposure of truth. Victoria's arrogance and reckless practices had created the evidence that brought her down. I'd simply illuminated what was already there. The comment section was brutal, but predictable. "Isn't this the architect who humiliated that woman at the awards ceremony?" one reader wrote. "Karma has perfect timing." Another comment made me pause. "I worked at Archer & Stone during the Victoria era. She created a toxic culture where intimidation was disguised as excellence. Glad someone finally held her accountable." Victoria had built her entire professional identity on manipulation and dismissing legitimate concerns. And now that foundation was crumbling completely. The same arrogant thinking she'd used to undermine my marriage had made her reckless with public safety. 7 months after leaving David, I realized the transformation was complete. The woman who had once been dismissed as a talentless trophy wife was now leading forensic investigations for one of the Pacific Northwest's most respected engineering firms. My analysis influenced construction safety decisions worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Industry publications quoted my research, and other firms tried to recruit me monthly. But the professional success was only part of the story. For the first time in years, I was making decisions based entirely on my own preferences and priorities. My apartment reflected my taste rather than compromises with someone else's vision. My schedule revolved around work I found challenging rather than supporting someone else's ambitions. Friday evenings, I'd sit on my balcony with a glass of wine, watching the Portland skyline transform in the fading light and marveling at how peaceful life could be without constant tension and dismissal. No more analyzing every conversation for hidden criticisms. No more wondering if my professional insights would be valued or ignored. No more walking on eggshells around someone else's fragile ego. The divorce papers arrived on a Monday, requiring only my signature to make official what had been emotionally finished months ago. David had included a handwritten note that I read once before filing it away. "Jennifer, I know I can never undo the damage I caused. You were always the stronger, smarter partner in our marriage. I just wasn't mature enough to see it until it was too late. I hope you find the respect and recognition you've always deserved. David." The apology felt insufficient after years of dismissal, but I appreciated the acknowledgement. David was facing his own consequences: unemployment, professional reputation damaged by association with Victoria, and the loss of a wife whose expertise could have saved his career if he'd bothered to value it. As I signed the divorce papers, I thought about the couple we'd once been. Two ambitious graduates with cheap coffee and unlimited dreams. That partnership had been real, but it had also been fragile. When success and outside influence tested our foundation, we discovered it wasn't strong enough to survive. But from the ashes of that failed marriage, something better had emerged. Not revenge or vindication, but resurrection. The woman Victoria had tried to diminish was thriving in ways neither she nor David could have imagined. The truth had done all the work. I'd simply provided it with the opportunity to shine. 6 months later, I received an invitation to speak at the National Structural Engineering Conference. The topic: Professional Integrity and Public Safety, Case Studies in Forensic Investigation. Standing at the podium in front of 800 engineers, I told a story about finding your voice after years of being silenced, about the importance of speaking truth even when it's uncomfortable, about never allowing anyone to diminish your expertise or professional value. I didn't mention names. I didn't need to. After the presentation, a young woman approached me, probably fresh out of graduate school, her conference badge identifying her as a structural engineer at a small firm. "Thank you," she said quietly. "My boss keeps dismissing my safety concerns. After hearing your presentation, I'm going to document everything and report it if necessary. You gave me courage." I smiled at her, remembering the woman I'd been at that award ceremony, holding a name tag that called me talentless. "Never let anyone convince you that your expertise doesn't matter," I told her. The truth always finds a way to surface. Sometimes it just needs someone brave enough to bring it into the light. Walking out of that conference hall, I felt something profound settle in my chest. Not satisfaction or triumph, but peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you did the right thing, even when it was difficult, even when it cost you everything you thought you wanted. The woman they'd tried to destroy had become stronger than they could have imagined, and she was just getting started.